Good morning, my magnificent ones. Sue Paulson here, your magnificence mentor, and welcome to Tea with Sue. Well, today it's actually iced tea with Sue, raspberry thriller. I ditched my hot tea and my favorite teacup in favor of a nice crystal goblet filled with something cold because it's hot here. It's been hot for a while, and if you've ever been to northern Canada where we have lots of ice and snow, you might be surprised at how hot it is. I know I am. So you can see my fan in the background. I have another fan over here. So things are heating up, and tomorrow it's supposed to be even hotter. So it seems to be an appropriate time then to talk about emotions, and particularly the emotion of anger. So why did I want to talk about anger of all things? Well, it flared for me last week. I haven't been that angry for quite some time. And it was just about life and things that weren't going as well as I wanted them to go. And I was fed up. I'd gone from, mild irritation to a stronger frustration, and then it just built and built to the point where I was mad. Now, I didn't hit rage. I didn't hit that volcanic eruption that I've experienced before that quite frankly scared me, because when I experienced it years ago, I didn't know I had that level of anger in me. And it really spooked me because I didn't know what to do with it. And isn't that one of the biggest challenges that we have when we hit one of those really raw emotions, excuse me, like anger, is we don't know where to go with it. And of course, because of the volatility of the emotion, anything could happen, right? And we might do something that's either inappropriate or harmful to ourselves or to others, or we might say something that causes a real rift in a relationship because we didn't know how to deal with this anger that was coming up for us. So, and of course, everybody says, oh, calm down, calm down, calm down. Well, that doesn't help when you're in the midst of this boiling over, right? Somehow the heat needs to be removed in such a way that it enables you to gradually get back to your usual demeanor, your usual way of behaving, right? So anger is a very interesting emotion. Lots of people would argue that you shouldn't be angry, that's not an appropriate emotion, and you shouldn't have it. Well, they can say that till the cows come home, but quite honestly, it's part of our range of feeling that is our human experience, and it's contrast, right? So we might have extreme volcanic rage on one hand, and smooth sailing peace and calm on another, and everything in between. So that's just our makeup and who we are. So it seems to me that rather than say, well, you shouldn't get angry, is to say, well, when you get angry, how are you going to deal with that? How are you going to get back your equilibrium, your balance, and so on? Well, of course, the first thing with any feeling, especially the ones that we would label negative, negative feelings. I mean, anger is not necessarily life enhancing, except that there's such an energy to anger that sometimes when we've had enough, when we're not willing to take it anymore, it will trigger us to do something to get out of the situation. And so it has its place. It has a purpose to our survival. It really does. And so it isn't that we want to just get rid of it. It's to say, well, how do I make it so that if I'm feeling anger, which is totally appropriate, it's totally appropriate to feel anger. There's nothing wrong with feeling anger. It's when your actions towards yourself or to someone else because of the anger, that's the problem. So that's what isn't good. That's what we don't want, is we don't want to harm ourselves, harm anything else or anyone else as a result of this intense feeling that just comes up in us. So what do we do instead? Well, there's lots of strategies. There's lots of ways that we can regain our equilibrium. Sometimes in the moment, somebody can interrupt the anger by saying something that causes us to laugh out loud, and it kicks us out of that trigger, and then we start to calm down. So that can happen. Going for a walk in nature and just letting the steam kind of pour out of us as we stride along, like walking it off, can be a big support in going from the full-blown anger and then just gradually back down to, okay, I feel okay. Now, for me, it will often trigger tears. And if I'm really, really angry, then the tears will just start to flow. Well, when I've cried and cried and cried, I feel much better. And tears are nature's way of healing. So again, you know, guys, you've been given a raw deal when you were brought up to believe, well, big boys aren't supposed to cry. Well, it's crap. It's not right. It's tears are important. And if you talk to men in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, their emotions are much closer to the surface, and you'll see them cry. And they feel a little bit ashamed because that's not considered appropriate in our society. And yet it's a genuine expression of what a person is feeling. So why would we label tears as bad or wrong because of the gender issue? I mean, no. Sometimes tears are inappropriate in the situation, but that doesn't mean having a good cry later isn't warranted. So tears can be a soothing, healing way of ramping down that heightened sensitivity that you are to the anger. Always, when it took me, I had to learn this. It wasn't something that I was brought up with, but in my 20s, it was important that I learned to take responsibility for my feelings. Someone else might have triggered whatever's going on with me, so particularly anger, because that's what we're talking about. So they may have triggered it, but they're not to blame. Now, I'm not to blame either that my anger got triggered, but I am responsible for the anger in me because it is in me. And then I'm responsible for the choices that I make after that. I'm responsible for how I deal with my anger. So, and obviously, if it has built up to a point where there's an eruption, then it's likely that I didn't deal with all of the little things along the way that I could have. So one of the things that triggered my anger last week was I had been so patient in certain areas of my life, just patient, waiting for things to happen. I'd be working away and wanting a result, and it wasn't coming, and it wasn't coming, and it wasn't coming. And oh, just be patient, just be patient. So I learned that lesson well at my mother's knee. Well, and it served me because I was pretty impatient as a kid. I was like like a hot potato bouncing around. I wanted things to happen, and I wanted them to happen now, and they didn't most of the time. So I needed to learn some patience. So I did, but I learned it a little too well. And so then I got to the point where I was almost complacent. I wouldn't actually demand anything, or I just wait. Okay, my turn's coming, my turn's coming, my turn's coming. And then it seems like I'm still at the back of the line, and I'm still at the back of the line, and I'm going, when is it gonna be my turn? Come on now, I've done everything right. When is it my turn? So that's what a small sample of what I was dealing with last week. So I had a raging hissy fit about all of that and saying, you know, I'm a good person, this isn't fair, and I'm railing at the universe and swearing at God and the whole bit. But you know, no thunderbolts came down. It's all good. And after the aftermath of that was when I had time to, once I'd calmed down, then I had kind of a little chuckle and say, wow, you were really wound up. But of course, the tendency in bygone years would have been to beat up on myself. Oh, what's the matter with you getting so angry like that? That's not appropriate. And make it even worse because I'm beating up on myself for a genuine human emotion that was the result of what had been going on in my life. And somehow I needed to deal with it. I mean, better out than in, right? I once read a thing on depression, and it just said depression is anger turned inward. Well, I don't know for sure if that's true, but it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? That we turn on ourselves when we know we're not allowed to express really how we feel, especially when we're angry. And so then we get mad at ourselves and we just turn it inward. And well, I don't have to tell you what's going on in regard to depression in our world. There's lots of people that are suffering from it, and it's nasty. So I wonder, you know. So anyway, back to how do we deal with this? So I've talked about a couple of ways that you can go for a walk in nature, walk it off, get away from the situation if that's what it is, and let off some steam. Some people go for a run. Some people, you know, hit a racket ball up against the garage. There's lots of ways of go pump iron, lots of ways of making all of that, the stress hormones that come from anger, to dissipate, because you don't want them sitting in your tissues, because it takes a good 20 minutes before that anger that has toxic chemicals attached to it dissipates in the body. So we want to make sure we deal with that physically. Otherwise, you're going to hurt. There's no question of that. If not immediately, down the road, it builds up in the body, and it's not a good thing. So we want to find ways to deal with it and soothe ourselves and get out of that as quickly as we can. You know, it's what would be the point in raging for days and days? I mean, I had probably a 20-minute rant, and most of it was while I was typing on computer, because I think better when I'm typing. And so I'm just for probably a good 20 minutes, and I got it all out, and I felt much better. And I thought, oh, whew, all right then. So that's another way you can do that. So putting things into perspective is also a way that I've used before that helped me, where once I allowed the feelings, so you feel the feelings and allow them to express themselves to you, like you just need to feel them. You don't want to deny them or push them away or say, no, I shouldn't be feeling this way. Well, you are feeling this way, so there's no shouldn't about it. You are feeling this way. So just allow yourself that full-blown experience to, what does it feel like in your body to feel rage? Where does it hit you? And notice that and allow it in, because it's I mean, emotions don't come up in your body for no reason. It's the body's way of communicating to you that something is off. Something is not working right. And so it can't talk to you the way another person can talk to you. So it talks to you through your emotions and through physical discomfort. So listen and say, okay, body, something's wrong here. What are you trying to tell me? And allow yourself to feel it. And then if you tune into, well, okay, anger, what's this all about? It's interesting how often you'll get an intuitive knowing of, oh, okay, because this happened or that got triggered or whatever, now I see, oh, something to learn here, something to absorb, something to understand, whatever. So as we seek some perspective on it, then it's helpful to say, well, is it as bad as I was thinking it was a moment ago when I was in my full-blown rage about it or anger about it? Well, now that I've calmed down some, actually, it's not as bad as that. Doesn't mean that I'm not going to do anything. It doesn't mean I'm not going to take action, but at least I can, in the context of whatever else is going on in my life, maybe it doesn't stack up as high as what this does. And so maybe it's not as drastic or dramatic or traumatic or whatever as I thought it was. So perspective can help us do that. It's taking a step or two back. And it's like you have this little observer who is above your head and can see all that's going on and watches you experience what you're experiencing, and then can weigh in and say, okay, yeah, well, you were feeling that way and that's perfectly okay. And now let's think about this. Let's figure this out and what's going to happen next here. So there's another possibility. You also can tap into a couple of different, I've tried 2 different soothing techniques that have worked wonders to pull me down from being anxious and from being angry, and really helped me get my level of equilibrium back. And one of them is the emotional freedom technique, the tapping technique. So there's lots of free videos on YouTube where you can learn the points about the face and tap, and it guides you through whatever it is that you're going through to deal with. And I found it highly beneficial. So there's one that I would really recommend that you check out. And it's easy, it's simple, you can do it anywhere you are. And I did it on the plane one time when I was just missed the flight and I was just hyperventilating. I was so anxious. And 10-15 minutes of tapping and I just calmed right down and I was back to my usual self. So tapping is a great strategy. This past week, I discovered another technique that I didn't know about. It's in the neurosciences area. So they're doing lots of research in neuroscience about the brain, because for lots of years, we didn't have the technological advances to try to figure out what was actually going on in the human brain. But now with fancy computers and electrodes attached to your skull and so on, they can zero in on different parts of the brain and see what's going on, and then work with strategies to see if one particular technique might work better than another or whatever. So one of the newer techniques that has come to the fore, which you also can do a search on YouTube and watch some videos on, is called havening. Havening. So if you think of safe haven, right? So havening. Well, this is such a simple preventative thing that you can do for your own body that makes such a difference. So I watched this video. I was so intrigued. A friend had mentioned it and said, well, Sue, just go on YouTube. There's videos on there. So I did right that night. And I'm watching this, fascinated by this doctor in New Zealand who has started using this technique in his practice. And he didn't invent it, but he does give the name of the person who discovered this. And anyway, there's really three simple parts to it. And so I'll show them to you now because I was so intrigued with it and I thought it was so cool. So the first, and you've seen people do this, you've seen people rub their hands together, right? And well, why do they do that? Well, maybe they're just standing there and not realizing, but what they've discovered in neuroscience is when you rub your hands together, palm to palm, like this, it's a soothing technique. It soothes the mind and soothes the soul and soothes the brain. So this is the first, you've probably seen people anxiously, maybe they have to do public speaking and they're sitting there and they have their hands on their laps and they're rubbing their hands up and down their thighs. Well, it's to soothe themselves and they don't realize it, because they didn't know about this before. So this is one thing you can do. So you can be just sitting on the bus and just rubbing your hands together and it will help soothe. So that's one of them. The other one is, so there's three. And the other one is to just cross your arms and put your hands on your shoulders. And you're simply just then running your hands down your arms to your wrists. And then you just go back up and you just gently, as much pressure as you want. Some people might do more pressure, some just light finger touches. And you're just soothing yourself that way. And it just, because what they discovered in the research was that there's pressure points that connect to the amygdala in the brain where we store trauma, and it begins to soothe that area. So that's the other one. And then the third one, and this one they recommend, make sure you have clean hands before you do this because you're touching your face. So it's to just run your hands just lightly over your face, over your cheeks, your eyes, and you can do your hair and your ears, and you're just gently soothing yourself. And if, I don't know about you, but it feels really good to me. So I've been doing this, and one of the fascinating bits of information that came from this video that I watched is that they said when there's trauma stored in the amygdala at the back of the base of the brain, using their protocol for these three different parts of havening, they can actually remove the trauma permanently so that you're never triggered again by that trauma, which I thought, whoa, everybody has, some kind of trauma from something, and to be able to just release yourself from that so it doesn't come up anymore. I think that's huge. So that was a big boost to my week. And I thought it was so fascinating that it came right on the heels of me going through this big burst of anger. And there's the contrast, right? So today, I really wanted to share that with you to give you some healing tools that you can use, because we're moving more and more into preventative medicine, where it's so important as individuals that we begin to take charge of our own health and well-being. There aren't enough doctors for everybody to run to, nor do they always know exactly what might be going on with you. Excuse me. So I think it's really important that each of us begins to understand how our own bodies work and how they connect with the soul and the mind and the emotions, and then find ways that we can actively look after ourselves so that we can live a healthy and vibrant life. That's part of our magnificence, right? I mean, our bodies are wired to help us live magnificently. But if we don't weigh in and help them along, then well, where are you going to live when your body gives out, right? So So that's what I want to challenge you this week is to check out some of these different, check out the different emotions that you're experiencing right now. And then also on the other side of that, how do you soothe yourself? What ways can you bring yourself so that you've not only dealt with it, but then you've been able to move on in a calm and peaceful way? You know you can do this because you're that magnificent. If you're enjoying Tea with Sue, I invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can also, and I really encourage you to download my free app, The Magnificence Mentor, where you can get all the Tea with Sue videos. This is video number 87, I think. And there's much more on the app as well. In the meantime, have a glorious weekend. Stay as cool as you can if you're in a hot climate right now. And we'll see you next week on Tea with Sue.